Okay, here's the round 4 game of the spring online competition. Opponent opened with e4 and we pushed through the centre and felt fairly comfortable with this starting point because we're looking at the end game opening, and I had a buy in the previous round 3, so I was really looking forward to playing in this game. So they developed the knight, so felt pretty normal, nothing too threatening. Brought our knight out to defend the pawn, and pretty used to this particular maneuver, so we captured, and we decided to bring the knight out on this occasion. I've been practicing in my little secret training hall, developing the knight based on evaluation of previous games. Ordinarily I would take the knight here, then the queen would come down, and then we'd push this pawn here and then develop the knight and get the bishop out. But evaluation basically states that pushing this knight here seems to be an okay maneuver, so I'm always into trying to practice new things, trying to work the evaluations into my game if I understand what it is that they're attempting to show me. So I understand this process, so we're going to follow the process as far as we can depending on what the opponent does. So they pushed through, which was expected, so we captured the pawn, and then we developed the knight pinning through to the king and castled king safety. So all the key components so far are working for us. Our king is safe, our pieces are developed on the board, our knight currently is unprotected, so that's something to be mindful of. So the opponent actually attacked the pawn. I did expect the queen to come here to put pressure onto the knight, but we did have defensible rationales. We had the rook coming here, and if the bishop decided to attack, then we did have the pawn here, so there was enough really to basically support the knight if that did happen. So we captured the knight and brought the knight rook through, now looking for an x-ray through to the king. Bishop blocks, looking to go and castle, and we're looking to be an annoyance to the opponent, so knights hunt the bishops in our mantra, so attacking the bishop makes sense, and they actually moved the bishop out the way. I did feel at this moment in time that with two center knights like this, we were managing the opponent's tempo, so felt like I was currently maybe 2 or 3 tempi ahead of the opponent in terms of development and also achieving management of key squares and key files. So wanted to get another piece into the action, which was the bishop, also supporting the knight as well, and they castle. So they're behind in terms of development, behind in terms of developing major pieces. So now we can target a higher piece with a lesser piece, which is the pawn, and we can develop our white square bishop out to be a menace to the opponent. So looking at the gauge bar here, the gauge bar is slowly going down for the advantage that whatever we had created, the evaluation is saying, well, you're losing the advantage that you've created. I didn't feel that way in the game. I felt like we were developing quite nicely, and we were slowly but surely using the end game opening process by attacking key squares, key pieces, and managing our own tempo wise, and grabbing more tempi. So we moved the knight now. We did have options of moving the knight to here, but the ethos that we are working on is the king's castle does not protect the king. So if you're moving pieces away from your king, you're weakening your king's area. So I thought I'll bring that psychology into the game so that we're practicing what we're preaching and hopefully making our game stronger. So we brought the knight across, protecting our king area, as well as developing for potential attack towards the bishop, because knights hunt the bishops in our mantra. So bishop moves, attacking the knights. He's got like a 2-on-1, the knight and the bishop. We do have a pawn defending that area as well as the rook. So we brought the knight through, attacking the bishop like we said, and the bishop doesn't want to be captured that way, so we can capture back quite easily. Goes for the exchange, and at this point in time I did feel we were probably like 5 tempi up now because of the development of our pieces and the opponent's lack of development of theirs. So they come across with the rook. Don't need to exchange here because we're looking to own this file potentially, so we didn't want to give that up. Captured the knight, so we can reduce down now. I believe we're a pawn up at this stage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's right. A pawn up at the moment. So they relinquish ownership of the file, so we gladly take. And now we're looking to support our knight as best possible. One of the key problems that they have is that their king is stuck on the back here. So if the bishop does take, and if the pawn takes, and if the rook takes, then it would be a back rank checkmate eventually, because the rook would come here, his rook would have to come back, and then our rook would take, and then the king has nowhere to go. So it looks like they saw this, so they pushed the pawn. We brought our rook up, defending the knight. Captures anyway. At this point in time, I felt that the game was completely manageable for us, with a nice centralized rook owning this key open file here, the only open file I can see actually in the game. So now we're about 7 tempi up. Again, a case in point in the last game that we played, which was in game 2, where tempo wise we were up so many tempo, it was really quite difficult for the opponent to actually grab that time back. It's a strange psychology, but it's a psychology that seems to be working quite nicely for my longer games, and it's the smallest of details. So we push through here, looking to basically prevent the rook coming here or actually getting into action, so we could win the pawn structure, win the tempo, and potentially get a pass pawn if they did push down. And surprisingly, that they did actually push down. As you can see, the gauge bar showing that we're in advantage here, but this felt fairly comfortable in terms of winning those all important tempi. So probably now about 6, 7 tempi up is quite a lot. It's not in the teens though, like in the game 2, but it's getting there. So they capture, and at this point now, really and truly, you're talking 8 or 9 tempi up now. We've got a potential pass pawn here. There's potential for this pawn to be moving up, even this pawn as well. Get the king up, and I don't think there's much that can really stop our attacks. We do have this as a semi-pass pawn, so there's a lot going on for us. So they decide to push down. We start moving the king up, looking to support, and we can capture. And we were very mindful of the rook coming down, putting check on the king, but felt the king could either move up to come and support, so he's going to spend a lot of time attacking the king. Our king could move up, and then we could start moving this pawn up here to get promoted. That was the initial sort of thought process. So they captured, we start pushing the pawn, so he's now having to defend the pawn, well, not defend, attack the pawn rather, so we can put a check on the king just to get our rook in front of our pawn. So his king starts coming down. So at this point I did think, well, he could manage maybe getting his king down to here, down to here, that type of thing, or something, to try and sort of condense my king somehow. But I thought that's a long-winded way of actually operating, because we could potentially still get some type of check or promotion of the pawn. So we pushed the pawn a bit further up, and this pawn move was done, I think, relatively quickly. Because we've studied the passed pawns want to be pushed concept, this was an appropriate position to actually take. So we push past the pawn, so now we have two passed pawns that the opponent has to contend with. His king unfortunately can't come here because the pawn is actually protecting this square. So we can push this pawn up. So the king comes, but then obviously the pawn is going to be supported by our rook. So we can quite easily get the promotion. And if you notice, the king can't go back. It can't come here, can't go there, can't go there, and it can't go there. So it was a checkmate. So an interesting game, again, of winning those all-important small tempi movements as soon as the opponent is having to defend a piece, taking advantage of that action in terms of putting more pressure on again, keeping a focal point on pressuring key areas, key pieces, and then really supporting the pieces that you've got towards the end game opening.